guys. So far, we have our sign up routes and then our sign up controller. We have seen how we can take information from our users, save them to the database, and hash their password with Bcrypt. I mentioned that it is not security wise to just save your user's password in the database. It makes sense to encrypt that password using Bcrypt. And we've also seen how to log in our users, how to take their email address and password to check our database to be sure if the email address exists and to confirm if the password is the same thing. So since these two are working, the next thing for us is to check how to allow only logged in users to perform some actions on our site. Now, a question I've seen young junior developers ask over and over again is what the difference is between authorization and authentication. Now, authentication is the process of creating or creating an identity for a user, creating an identity or verifying identity for a user. So you are creating a new user, you are signing the user up, you are signing the user in, you are creating a token for that user. That is the process of authentication. Now, authorization now is the process of allowing only logged in users to access particular routes. So let's say we have a route on our app that we don't want users that are not logged in to access, or we have a route that we want only admins to be able to access. This is the process of authorization. So we take the identity that we've created for them in the authentication stage to allow access to certain routes or resources. Now, for our own application, our blogging application, we want only logged in users to be able to create blog posts. We don't want random users to come to our site, create blog posts, and then just go. We want only logged in users to be able to create blog posts so that we can track each blog post. So the way to do that is by using middlewares. I've mentioned over and over again what a middleware function is. A middleware function is a function that is executed during the request and response lifecycle. So if we are saying the moment a client makes a request to our app it gets executed between the moment a client makes a request to our app and the time we send a response back to the client. Now, a middleware also has access to the request response object. We've seen this is the request and response object. So we've seen request response object over and over again. A middleware also have access to this request and response objects. And then it takes a third parameter, which is next. Now, instead of just explaining, let me start writing code so you see how it works. So inside of my SRC folder, I will create a middleware folder, and inside of my middleware folder, I'm going to create a new file that is going to have my validation check. So I'll just call this validate user.js. So a middleware is essentially a function. It is a function. It is just in this function we are performing this check. So I'm going to have validate user. So I have an arrow function here, validate user, and now it has three parameters: the request, just as we have seen over and over again, the response, and then this next that can be pretty new. So next here in this case is what we use to call the next function in the stack, but we'll get there. So we have validate user, which is a function. So it is this validate user that we want to be able to use to check to protect our routes. So that if anybody tries to create a new blog post, we try to validate their identity. We try to confirm that the user is one of us. That we will try to confirm that the user is saved in our database. Now, if they are not saved in our database, we can send them back. We can send the response back to the client to say, sorry, you can't access this route, or error 401, or this route is only for logged in users. So, okay, now that we have our function, we have to write our code inside our function. So the code we want to write now is to, again, just as I have said, to validate the identity of our user. Now, to validate the identity of our user by convention, when we are creating our user controller, we have we are using gwt.sign to create a token. It is this token that we send to the client when the user tries to log in. Now, if the user tries to access a protected route, it is that token that we expect the client to send back to us. So if the client is trying to create a new blog post, we want to check if that token is part of the incoming request. Now, if the token is part of the incoming request, we allow the user to log in. But if the token is not part of the request, we send them a response, and we send them a response to say, sorry, only logged in users can access this route. Now, and by convention, to send the token, it makes sense to use the header of the incoming request. So we are going to say let auth header, let me use auth header equals rec dot headers, rec dot headers. So it's header, the headers that is part of the incoming request. Now, it is not just enough to use rec.headers. There's also a particular field on the headers that we want to access. That's the authorization. Again, it is by convention to send this token as part of authorization in the headers or in the header of the request. So I'm going to do dot authorization. Now I can now check if this auth header exists. So if auth header exists, but if it does not exist, we send the response back to the client. So what we are basically doing here is there in this incoming request, do we have authorization as part of the headers? If it exists, we can say, okay, let's go to the next line of action. But if it does not exist, we know that this user is not one of us. So we can say res.send only logged in users can access this route. Yeah. Now, if the auth header exists, another thing we want to check for or confirm is that this authorization, it is not just enough that it is coming, it is not just enough that the client is using it to send a token to us. You can send different things as part of your authorization. You can send different credentials as part of your authorization. But we want to confirm that this incoming credential that we are checking for starts with bearer. So by convention, we use bearer to mark a credential from the client. So we know that any credential that starts with bearer is for our login process. So I can say if auth header does starts with bearer and space. So we are saying if auth header starts with bearer and space, that's bearer, because the way it is going to be sent from the client is we'll have, let's say we have bearer space and then our token. This is how the client is going to send it to us. So what we want to do is confirm that the incoming request the authorization starts with bearer and space before we now try to access the token. So I can also take this and just bring it up so we don't have long code. So I can say if auth header exists and auth header starts with bearer and space. So it is not enough that it exists. If it does not exist, send the response back. And even if it exists but does not start with bearer and space, because we cannot confirm that this credential is for our login in, we send the response back. So we have so now that we are confirming that the two of them are valid, these two statements are valid, we can move to the next line. So now that we know that they are valid, what we want to do now is now get the token, get this token. So we have let token equals, now this is what we have as a string. This is what we have as a string. We don't need bearer and space. I've just mentioned that we just use it to mark the credential. This is what we need. This token is what we need. Now, how do we access this? We can access this using JavaScript. So we have auth header dot split. So auth header dot split, you use dot split to split a string into an array. Use a dot split method to split a string into an array. So we have bearer and this, we want to split this into an array. And now, because we don't need bearer and we need this second part, the identifier or the common thing between these two that we can use to perform this split is this space. So we are going to say dot split with space. So that means it takes this, puts it in one array, and takes this, puts it in the other array. So when we perform dot split like this, this is what we are left with. So we have an array like this, bearer, and then this token. This is what we are left with. So now that we now have our array, we can now use our knowledge of arrays to access this token. And if you want to access the second value in the token we will just use one like this. We've gone over how to do this when we did our brief introduction to JavaScript. So we are using dot split to split our string into an array, and but we don't need this array. We need this second one. We need the second one. So we are using this array notation to get bracket notation. Sorry, to get the second value in the array. So we can now say, now that we have our token, we now want to use the same JWT that we used to sign the token. We want to use the same JWT to verify our token. So I'm going to come here and import const JWT equals require JSON web token. So I can now come here and say JWT.verify the token, pass the token as a parameter, and then we now pass a second parameter. While trying to create the token, we use this second field, this process.env.signin key. This signing key is what we use to sign our ID. Now, to verify this token, now we still need to use this signing key as a key. Now I am storing, again, don't forget, I am storing this in my .env file. That's why I have process.env.signin key. So it's not like if you are working with your own code, you have signing key by default. You can store it as anything inside of your .env file. Now in my own .env file, I have signing key. That's why I'm getting process.env.signin key. So I'm going to come to my validate user here and use and pass it again, process.env.signin key. Let me just come here, copy it, sign-in key. So you have JWT.verify process.env.signin key. So I can also come here and just put my try catch block. So I have catch error, and I can say, so if this token is invalid or something, we can just use this catch block. So we can say token is invalid. But if it exists, we want to say, let user, because from our signing controller, what we are signing is the ID of that user. We are signing the ID of the user that logged in. So here it just makes sense to use that we are verifying, we are getting back the ID. What we signed, we are getting back this ID. So now say let user, can say console.log user. So if we get to this stage, if we get to line 9, we are sure that this user is logged in. We are sure that the user that is trying to access this route is logged in. So what next? The next thing we do now is, because it is possible that in our sign up, it is in our create post controller, it is possible that we want to use the ID, this ID that we signed during the signing process. It is possible that we want to use it. So what we'll do now is I'll say rec.user equals user. So I know that I can get, so this let user that I have assigned JWT.verify to, I can do rec.user equals to the ID. So in my create post route, I can just do rec.user.id. rec.user.id. So now that I have rec.user, the next thing is I am done with my validate user middleware. So the next thing now is to call the next function in the stack. That is the next thing after validation of the user. And the next thing is the process of creating a blog post. That is where this next parameter comes into play. So I can just call this next, because it's a function, I can just call it like this. So if I call it like this, it just says, when it gets to this place, it says, okay, that means you are done performing your check. Let me now go to the next function. Let me go to the next function, which in this case happens to our business logic. So we have let user equals JWT.verify token, the signing key, the key that we are using to sign the user ID, and then we are sending rec.user equals to user, and now we are using next to call the next function in the stack. Just simple and straightforward. Now without this next, if I remove this next, when our code gets to this place, it won't know what to do next. It will just be hanging there. It won't know what to do next. So that is why it is important to always include this next if you are not sending a response back immediately. So I can now do module.export, module.export, validate user, validate user. So if I come to my post route now, I can import validate user, say const validate user equals require. Okay, I am going out. I'm in my middleware, and I'm in my validate user. Now, because I'm using it as a default export, I can just get it like this. Now, what we want to protect is this create post route. So the way to apply the middleware that we've just written is to come before our create post like this and just add a comma, and I have validate user. So if I put let me put my semicolon here and save this, and now we are done. Just simple and straightforward like that. So we have validate user before post controller dot create post. So in our validate user, don't forget we are checking for authorization. We are checking that the authorization starts with bearer and space, and then we are verifying the token. And now after verifying the token, we are assigning it to rec.user. We are assigning the user ID to rec.user, and we are calling next. So next here we'll call this create post controller that we created. So if we save this, we can text, and let me go to my postman. Let me go to postman, and yeah, okay, I don't think I've started my server. Let me see. Okay, just run clear. Can say npm start and wait for it to start. Npm starts. Why is it taking some time? And okay, so while it is doing that, let me come to postman. I think I'm on port 8000 API v1 users signing. Then body, what am I using to sign in? Okay, so we have this. Is it ready? Port 8000. Is it connected? Okay, I'm waiting for it to connect to our database. Waiting for it to connect to our database. Yeah, connected to database successfully. So if I want to log in now, if I click on send, now this user is signed in. I get the user data and the token. So it is this token that we need. It is this token that we need. So I will copy this, create a new tab. Let me delete this. Don't save. Create a new tab. Say localhost, HTTP localhost. Now I am going to post/post, and then this is a post route. So part of my headers, I want to add authorization, and because we want to use bearer to mark this credential, I'm going to say bearer space and then paste my token like this. So if I want to add a new post, I can say, let me come here. What are we requiring to create a new post? We have create posts. So we have title, category, body, and author. Coming. So we have title, we have category, we have body, and we have author. So I can come here and do this. Just make this clean a bit. Sorry. And then this. So for my title, I can say new blog post. For category, I use technology. For body, I have new blog. And for my user ID, let me see what we are doing here. User ID, let me just pass anything for now. Now again, instead of passing anything, since coming in the post route, since we have validate user, and don't forget inside validate user we have rec.user here, reg.user. So I can just come here and do reg.user instead of reg.body.user ID. Instead of asking the client to send user ID, we can just use reg.user.id. Don't forget, because we are using ID in while we are assigning the token. So I can now come here, just remove author and try to create. Let me just hit send. Let's see what happens. Post added successfully. So if I go to Postman, let me click on posts. I click on post, and if I scroll down, I can see new block technology, and there's no author. So let me come back to my schema. It's been long I opened this. So I have my post schema, I have author. So why are you not saving? You know what? In the next, this is already going too fast. So this is 21 minutes already. In the next video, we are going to test this middleware so that we can be sure it works. So I'll see you guys in the next video.